welcome back to Call the Damn Leads, the show by sales professionals for sales professionals. I'm your host, Drewbie Wilson, with more than 2 decades in the industry. I've seen it, been through it, heard about a lot of it. Now I'm bringing it to you, my favorite people in the world, the sales community, because let's be honest, this is the greatest industry around. You can come from any background, any story, and you can create success. And today's guest is no stranger to that journey. He has been moving and grooving in the space for a long time, taking care of business, and now helping others as the co-owner of Emerging Executive. I've got my friend, Mr. Joshua Wiesler. How are you, brother?
I'm doing well, sir. Doing well. Glad
Hey,
that you have me on.
I appreciate you jumping on. You know, you're one of those folks that I was introduced to as a fellow sales professional. It was like, hey, this is a guy that you should talk to. And so I'm excited, man. I want to jump right into this thing. I want to know, what's your craziest sales story?
All right. So my craziest sales story, I've got a couple of them, but the one that really speaks and comes out, it's multiple layers. And these are the ones that normally they've got curveballs, they've got all this stuff. So for me, I started my sales. I sold cell phones for about a decade, but when I started doing like cold calling and actually reaching out was when I made that shift into real estate. Before my current coaching company, I started, and I was doing wholesaling. I don't know if people know that. Basically, you're calling people that haven't reached out to say, hey, I want to sell my house. You're actually reaching out to them and saying, hey, would you be interested in an offer? Like, I remember the script like it was yesterday. And I had one guy who was a former military guy. He lived in this one area in St. Louis, and then he had another house right behind his house that they were living in. They had moved, so he had 2 vacant houses, and this guy was military. And every time I would talk to him, it was kind of like pulling teeth. I don't know if you guys have ever had that experience in sales. Like, he was interested, but he was making me work for it. And so we finally got the agreement. We finally got it in under contract. And then what we do is fully transparent, was helping him find an actual end buyer, because it required a lot of work. We weren't going to be doing the work ourselves, but we knew a lot of buyers that would pay us for the groundwork to go out and reach these people. And then they would buy the paper and they would close on the house. They would do the repair. And so with this, why it was one of the craziest sales experiences is, as well as not just reaching out to people, one of the things that was a fear for me and what I had to overcome was like letting these people down, because I didn't feel like I was the authority at that moment, right? I don't know if you've ever had that experience, right? We've got to change that identity. And so we get into it. We've got somebody that made a commitment and was ready to sign on the paper to buy this paper actually. And we get to him getting approval, which we thought he was the actual guy that could sign on it. They then pulled back a little bit and it was like, well, we already moved things forward. The seller's already like under the assumption it's going to close. And we ended up, they ended up like backing up a little bit. And we said, okay, hey, we're not going to buy this and close on it because, that's not our game plan. We were going to sell it to an end buyer, but our end buyer pulled back. So now we've got to find a new end buyer. We found another end buyer, right? So we found another end buyer in less than 24 hours, because this was a deal in a hot area in St. Louis. They actually were willing to pay 20 grand more than the first people were. So we were like, hey, this worked out well for us, right? That's what you think. What happened was we got this second commitment. And the first buyer ended up saying, hey, we are actually really big on integrity and honoring our word. One of our guys said that we would buy this. We're going to buy it and we're going to do it. So they actually signed the paperwork. So now we are in a contract for 20 grand less than what we've got another buyer on. And we know that the second buyer is a performer. So it's like, okay, how do we make this work? And so part of this in sales is really about being creative and providing solutions that work for everybody. So we went to the first guys that actually signed the contract. They were going to pay us 25 grand. We went back to them and we said, hey, also at that time, how the commissions was based, where if we had to use our owner's money to close on a deal, we would actually get less commission. So it got us to be real creative, right? So we went back to these first buyers and said, hey, we know you guys don't actually want to buy this. we know you are doing this out of your integrity. So what we actually have another buyer that said they'd buy it for 20 grand more than what you were offering. Here's what we propose. You close on it and then you sell it to the second buyer for the 20 grand extra, and we split that 20 grand. So for using your own money, closing it, and then selling it immediately, you guys are going to get a $10,000 wholesale and not have to do anything. So you're actually coming out ahead than having to buy this property you didn't want. And they were like, deal, how soon can we close on it? And at that point, yeah. So, and that's the thing, especially in sales, like, and that was, I remember sitting in our office with my former partner, Alyssa, and like after that initial call came in of like, hey, we're backing up a little bit, we kind of got a little defeated. And in sales, that's very easy to do. A lot of people like, we can go down the negative spiral or we can figure out a way to make it work, right? And I sat there with her and I said, hey, we're going to put some energy into this and we're not going to let this die because this is a deal somehow. And we ended up making an extra 10 grand on it after the first buyers pulled back a little. We ended up making 35 on it. The first buyers made 10 grand. The end buyer ended up having a great rehab in a great area in St. Louis. And the seller ended up having a deal that ended up working. And he was real big on making it as easy as possible, which sometimes meant like it was more difficult on me, right? But at the end of the day, everybody was happy. It worked for everybody. And like, that was one of the big, not turning points, but definitely a practice and an experience of like, oh, you can take something that looks like it's going to be a disaster and actually turn it out to make it look better if you can have. And for me in sales, that's what like the integrity and the authenticity piece for me as well is huge, is because when these curveballs happen, if you're authentic and transparent and you talk to everybody and like figure out a way to do it where you're not trying to manipulate, or when curveballs happen, you can talk to everybody and figure out how to make it work. And everybody's on the same page with getting the deal done versus you trying to figure out how to get the deal done without anybody supporting you doing it. So that I would say was probably one of my most convoluted and interesting and stressful like sales in the real estate world. Taking that into coaching has been a great experience. So,
well, there's a whole lot we're going to unpack from that, Josh, because I love that story. I've had a couple of other real estate investors on the show in the past, and we've talked about some of the just nightmares that go on in that world. And so what's great about it, though, is one of my previous mentors, he was big on saying, hey, man, a deal's a deal, and there's always a deal to be made. To me, that was so interesting because it really hones in on like the getting creative side of what you said at that point where it's like, you know, you guys have signed contracts, the numbers are there, these people have made commitments, and then you get into these situations where, you know, in real estate, especially, you don't know what you don't know until you start doing the research and you're already 3-4 weeks and thousands of dollars into a deal. And you're like, oh my golly, turns out it's John's sister's uncle-in-law that owns this thing. And they've been just putting their name on title work forever. But that ain't really. And so I know that it's real easy for those deals to go haywire quickly. But I love how you were able to pivot and go, well, let's get creative, man, because there's a deal to be made here. And with you, the original buyer being someone that was like, well, man, I'm going to do this even though I don't really want to do it. And then you were able to provide an additional layer of service to them, which service to me is a big part of the sales conversation. We're going to get into that in a minute. In doing so, I would have to imagine that created a lot of future opportunity between you and that original buyer of like, well, hey, man, you got me into this deal and then you helped me make a little bit of money. There had to be some referrals and some additional relationship that came from that in the future, too.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And a perfect example there is through my network, I actually helped that original buyer that made the offer. I actually helped him find his new broker in real estate probably 6 months ago. Like, beautiful. We're still in contact. We're still talking, friends with the owner of the company. And that's just it. When you show up in a way that helps people authentically, when maybe they're in a place of, and it's not even like they were in a bad place. They just were in a place where it's like, hey, we know that we probably screwed up here, so we're going to own it. And then like helping them not have to own it as heavy or as painfully. Oh yeah. That, like, you want to know how to build loyalty. That's loyalty.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And, you know, again, there's a couple things I wanted to pull from that. And one of them was that you had mentioned something about authority and, being a little bit afraid to get on the phones. One of the most interesting
Yeah.
things that I've experienced in building this business, I wrote the book, Call the Damn Leads. We have a page out there where people can download it, you can buy it. And when I call and follow up with these individuals, one of the most common things that I run into is call reluctance, maybe a fear to get on the phone because people are afraid that they don't know what they don't know. And imposter
Yeah.
syndrome is something that I've talked about a lot. I've written some, podcasts on that. I would love to know from you, when you first got into the game, how did you get over that? How did you pass that fear and just start picking up the phone to smile and dial?
Yeah. So how I overcame it, and I wasn't aware at the time, I had to change my identity. Like my identity was somebody that didn't feel like an authority. So for me, how I overcame it, I saw the writing on the wall where getting out of my own way and getting on the phone was a path to generate deals and feed me. Like sometimes that pain has to get big enough to where you'll put yourself into a situation where it's uncomfortable but not painful, because that's easier than being in the pain, right? And so for me, it was having a conversation with my mentor at the time, and we talked about the guy who was providing the money, and I said, "Hey, this guy is smooth. He is sales. He closes everything." And for me, it was like, how do I get to that point? And so the conversation was, "Hey," I had that talk with him, and he goes, "You come in, you sit at my kitchen table, and I'll be doing my work, and I'll listen to you make calls for like 3 to 4 hours, and I'll critique you as you do it." So probably made, I don't even remember the number because I lost count, but like going through all of our leads and calling. And there was times, and for, somebody that's uncomfortable as well, like there's a lot where you call and nobody answers. And so you got to give that message, and then you got silence. And then so it was probably a 3 to 4 hour journey of breaking that old identity of the guy that couldn't do it. And that's really like, if I could give a secret sales strategy, that would be it. The transformations happen on the level of identity, not like tactics and strategies. Those are great, but where we, as our coaching company really focuses on, we are working to help people shift at that level of who they are, which makes it so much easier to go out and do the things that you might have resistance to. Because the CRM is not gonna make it easier to hop on a phone. It's going to give you some information if you're ready to research. But like, I'm at the point now, real estate especially, where, you could say, "Hey, I've got this person I need to call." Okay, cool. And they're like, "Well, don't you want to know the background information?" And it's like, "No, I just needed the number and maybe what their name is." And even that, it's like, and you do this so often, like I can even recite it. It becomes muscle memory. It becomes who you are. It's like, "Hey, yeah, I know this call's out of the blue, but I'm looking for the owner of 123 Candy Lane. I don't know if I've even got the right number, but is this person either the owner or the manager that they may be open for an offer on your property or on that property?" So again, I don't know if I've even got the right number. Like for me, that tactic was like the lost child. But getting to the point where you can make that call over and over again is really what you're looking for. It's not the tactic that's going to put a Band-Aid on it or anything like that. It's how you show up with it.
Ooh, that is so good. And you kind of beat me because I always like to ask, what's that secret sales strategy? So I can see you did your homework before the podcast, man. Congratulations on that. But that makes this great because I know we're going to bring a lot of value to the listener today. And this is where you can really dive deep and understand that with what you're saying, it's what is the script? What is the process? Everyone, gets a little weird about having a script. And what most individuals do wrong with a script is they read it word for word and they try to be very robotic about it instead of looking at it, getting the context of what is the message, and then being authentic. Going back to what you said, hey, just being who you are. One of the things that I've always leaned in on in sales, and especially even now as a business owner, when people ask me a question I don't know, it's like, hey, this is a great opportunity for me to run that up to the flagpole to the guys upstairs. While I'm doing that, let's go through the rest of this process, make sure if there's any other questions that we need to address, we can do all of that at one time. That way we can make the right decision at that moment. But I still got a few more things to work through. That said, move into the next part of the pre-qualifying process. And I think for me, I've really learned, because I've worked with a lot of powerful individuals, they have a lot of respect for someone that will just say, you know what, I don't have that answer, but I'll get it for you, versus
Yeah.
immediately someone starting to BS them. And we have this crazy BS meter these days. Like we can see a red flag from a mile away. So as a sales
Yeah.
professional, I just encourage people, if you don't have an answer, it's okay, but you can go find it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the greatest
Yep.
skills you can develop is resourcefulness. And so, you know, with you and your coaching company, what are some of the things that you like to focus on from a, you know, sales perspective, and even that pre-qualifying, like the scripts? How do you guys hammer that home with your clients to make sure they understand the importance of it?
So that's a great question. For us, really, we hammer, like we said earlier, on the identity piece. And for us, it's creating a practice. The other piece for us, and I'm especially learning now in my own journey, and this is kind of the thing with coaches, is really peek behind the veil. We're trying to do the stuff that we are coaching other people to do at another level, and we are just probably a little further down the path. We're actually coaching the people that like we thought we were, right?
Mm.
So one of the things for us is like tapping into the places where you're already doing the thing that you think you're missing in sales. So what that means is like, have you ever heard the phrase, how we do anything is how we do everything? With that phrase, yeah. And so with that phrase comes also the energy of like, if I feel I'm missing something in my sales skill, are you really missing it in your sales skill, or have you not grown the capacity of that skill and that ability? Which normally our capacities get shrunk when traumas happen, when life happens, when all these things happen, and we shrink this capacity somewhere to either keep us safe or keep us familiar. And so for us, what I hammer on is like, what is the purpose of your call? Not like the outcome of the money, but the outcome of what you are actually looking to grow in yourself through this. So if it's like, hey, because a lot of people, myself included in the past, was like, hey, I've got these 20 calls I need to do, and I hammer through the calls just to get them done, not necessarily focusing on the growth that I want to get out of this. Hey, I'm going to practice my skill of, for one of the ones I love doing is setting the stage properly, like having conversations with people and letting them know how it goes so that you can take control in the beginning. That's one. Are you taking this phone call to grow the skill of another one that I love is like marrying the minds, I guess is what you call it, where I work to get an understanding of values for you so that I can walk you down the path in a way that we're joined hands together going down that path versus trying to convince you of why it's going to work for you. Because if I'm trying to convince you, then that's a level of force, as opposed to if I know your value system and it makes a lot of sense where like you're trying to build something for your family or you're trying to build a system because you love systems. If you're trying, for me, mine is like validation. I go out and do these things because I'm looking for validation, validating myself in life. Fantastic. How does that impact you? It's not about what happens, it's about how it impacts us in our life. And so that's, if we can get further into that, that's where you really start being able to move people. And you can only do that if you can do that with yourself. Because if
Mm.
you're surface level and you're trying all these tactics and you're trying all these things to convince people, really it's a low level form of manipulation, it's going to fall on deaf ears. You said it great. The BS meter, like if you, and speaking from the experience of growing through this over the last 3 years, I was the guy that knew how to talk on everything. I wasn't the guy that knew how to do anything, probably to a level where it actually felt successful, to a level where it actually feels like it's, we talked about this in the pre-call, authentic. And really, when you start getting into that level of authenticity and vulnerability and transparency, people just want to work with you because they know, like, and trust you, and they know you will work to figure it out to keep them protected and keep them in the loop. That's really what I feel people want most. They want to solve their problems and they want to do it with people they know, like, and trust, and know, care about them and have their best interest versus just trying to get the sale.
And this is why you work with professionals who have this experience, because it is more than just surface level. I love, because I've done a lot of NLP coaching and some different psychology studies, because this
Yeah.
is important. When you understand how someone operates, how they think, how they make decisions, what is influencing them from an unconscious level versus just the thing that they think that they got going on, you can truly
Right.
help people make such a massive change in their life. And from a sales perspective, when they feel as though they are the ones making the decision and you're simply facilitating the transaction, there is a whole shift in the way that things go on. And you start creating these raving fans that want to tell everyone about you and how you've changed their life. From a personal standpoint, there's like, very selfishly, that's an amazing feeling. You get messages from people that's like, oh, I did the thing you told me to do, and it was amazing. And you're laughing to yourself right now because it's like, yeah, you knew you were supposed to do that. I just told you how to do it. And maybe I gave you a different perspective or a tactic you hadn't thought of, right? But realistically,
Yeah.
most people know what they should be doing. They should be calling the damn leads. They should be having the conversations. It's all just a numbers game. But what I love about what you said is it all goes back to the basics. When I worked with some military guys, ex-special forces, I was always like, well, what's the secret, thing that you guys do back there that makes you so great? And they say, we practice the basics. Because when you get into the shit, right, when everything's going wrong and it's all burning down and you got bullets flying at you, you need to be able to fall back on muscle memory and the ability to pick up the phone on your worst day. Everything is going wrong. You missed the gym. It's raining. Your spouse is yelling at you. You need to be able to pick up that phone and run through that conversation confidently, knowing that whoever's on the other line, whether it's you got every single piece of information you can about them, or you simply have a phone number and maybe the right name, you need to be able to hop on there and do what you do in the heat of battle. That's what will make you successful. And Josh, I love how you so eloquently broke that down to trusting the process and being able to translate that to the other individual so that they feel as though it's them walking down that path. Man, this has been just an amazing conversation. I'm so grateful that we had this opportunity to connect. And I know this is just the beginning of a very fruitful relationship. That said,
Oh, yeah.
if people got a ton out of this, I mean, we could chat all day, but I want to be respectful of your time. If the listener got something out of this, what's the best way for them to come and find you? I know you guys are building your social media. You're putting out a lot of great content.
Yep.
How do they come and find you at Emerging Executive?
I will provide you a link to not just my socials, but also my Calendar. Facebook, it's Josh Wiesler, Wiesler.com. You can find me at, or not .com, whatever the extension is, and on Instagram as well. And yeah, like you said, we are in the process. We're rebranding, so the website's going to be on the next journey or the next iteration. So yeah, socials, and then the Calendar link I'll provide you on, I know, the website as well. That's where we're currently at. So.
Beautiful. We'll make sure we put all that stuff in the show notes. Now, before we get out of here, I always have one last question, right? Again, I mentioned at the start of this call, this is the greatest industry of all time, because no matter where you come from, what your background, personality type, you can be successful in sales. It requires a lot of hard work and dedication. However, I've seen people from every different industry, prison, super high-end schools, every different individual comes to sales and they're able to carve out a life for themselves. So Josh, let's say we've got someone listening to this call right now. They're new to the sales industry. They've made the decision to really take this to heart. What piece of advice would you give them to be successful in the long journey here?
Yeah, that's a question I get a lot. And my answer has always been the same. Find a mentor or someone who's doing it, not just doing it at a high level or at the level that you aspire to attain, but also how they are doing it, because that's just as important. Because you will get into an arena where you start learning these skills and tactics, and then they don't necessarily mesh with how you're internally guided in that value system. And then it becomes it creates more resistance. So find a mentor, find a way to provide them value. So for mine, when I started in real estate, reached out to him, and he's like, hey, you're going to have to talk to my acquisition person, and you're going to have to pay us, you're going to pay us a deposit, and then we'll give it back to you after you do your first 3 deals. They made me pay. And so providing the value was not just a financial commitment. It was also going out and finding them deals and splitting revenue. So I not only was learning, I was providing value to them at the same time. That's when it becomes reciprocal, and that's when you grow. If you're just going out to look to learn and take information, you're not being authentic and you're not being in that reciprocation. Your growth is going to probably be a little stunted, and that will help overcome and be transparent about it. Hey, I may end up working with you for a long time, but also like this might not go forever. And just be transparent, be authentic, and you'll find the right connection. If you are that way, you will attract it. So that's what I recommend. Either a mentor or a company that is doing what you're doing and what you want to do, and go out and learn how to work for them, or find out what they need that you can provide, and create a synergistic relationship. Because honestly, that's the same thing you're going to be doing in sales.
That is so beautifully put. And that, as they say, success leaves clues. And what I've learned over the years is anyone who's had any level of real success, and that's a perspective and a whole nother conversation for another show, but anyone who's truly built a life they're proud of, they're happy to share that information with you. However, there is a requirement to have some skin in the game. Sometimes it's a financial investment. Sometimes it's having to go and do some work in order to prove that you want it. But what you're really doing there is you're putting in the reps. You're getting the experience so that you can go and handle this on your own. Because if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. But if you teach him to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. And as you just said, finding a mentor, finding someone who can pour into you with that knowledge, it'll help you compress time. And time is that one true asset, man. We can make more money, but that time and energy that we invest into these things, into creating our true self-worth and value, that's what will allow you to create any life that you want, which is why I love sales. And Joshua, why I am so incredibly grateful for your time today, how much I cannot thank you enough for sharing some of your knowledge and your wisdom. Again, I'm super excited to continue following your journey myself. So again, we'll put all those socials in the note. I'll remind the listener to come out and find you, and just truly appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. It was a great time. And yeah, like you said, I'm sure we could have chatted for probably 3 hours on all this stuff. So no, it was great. I appreciate it.
Like-minded people, man. Well, you guys, if you enjoyed this show, make sure you share it on social media, tag us at Call the Damn Leads, tell your friends about it, leave a review. That's how we get in front of more like-minded sales professionals. And if you have a crazy story, here's the thing. I want to tell it. I want you to bring it to the world. I want to help you put that out there because, again, I have heard some of the craziest stuff, but every single time I get on these calls, I hear something new. So if you've got a story, head to callthedamnleads.com/podcast. Send us your information. Let's get you booked. I'd love to see you on the show. You know what to do next. Go call the damn leads. We'll see you on the next one.